Well, filter-free America is where I wanna be. Arriving on the shining black shores of oil-soaked Lady Liberty, with justice not just blind, but deaf, dumb, and unkind. Thank God I'm filter-free. It's filter-free America.
Motherfucker!
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Filter Free America podcast. I am once again extremely pleased that you have chose to listen to me ramble into a microphone. Welcome to the show. First off, this is a guest-free episode. Basically, you're just going to hear me ramble during this entire episode. Is just going to be me talking about stuff. But I will be sharing with you a very interesting experience that I had that involves a convicted murderer who was just recently executed. And I will definitely explain that a little bit further. But real fast, let me mention first my sponsor for the Filter Free America podcast, and that is simplewebsite.us. Simplewebsite.us. One more time, simplewebsite.us. As you know, Simple Website is known for helping people build high-quality websites using the Squarespace website builder, right? Now, some of you are probably thinking, hey, I thought Squarespace was designed that we could do it on our own. And, well, it was. That was the intention, right? And most people, a lot of people, some people can do it. But if you are like me and you are limited with your skills and education in the world of building websites, sometimes you need a little bit of help. And that is what Simple Website's business model is. Their programmers and designers have mastered the art of building websites using the Squarespace website builder, and they want to offer those skills to you. So if you need a ground-up build website, go to simplewebsite.us. Now, even if you want to do it yourself, and maybe you've already done it yourself, but you just need a little bit of help, please go to simplewebsite.us anyway, because they'd be more than happy to help you with just a little bit of work on your website. They don't care. They don't need to do the whole thing, right? They'll be more than happy to do a little tweak here and there and help you improve an existing website that you've already got going. And if you want to build yours completely from the ground up, you don't want anybody's help whatsoever, still go to simplewebsite.us, because when you get there, you will find some free tips and tricks that you can use on your website, and you don't have to pay them anything or anything. It's just free. Okay? What else do I need to mention? Okay. Also, please take time to subscribe, rate, and review the Filter Free America podcast. Please do that. That is the only form of admission I'm charging for this show. Is whatever you're using, whatever device you're using, whatever platform, be it iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening to this podcast, please make sure you're subscribed to it. And if that platform does have the ability to leave a rating or a review, please give it a highest rating possible and a few kind words about the show, especially if you're on iTunes. iTunes, super, super important right now. They've got the testicles of the podcast world. They're holding them in their grasp. And if you want to make it in the world of podcasting, you need to get lots of ratings and reviews. I don't know what it does, some kind of fucking magic shit, because when you get lots of ratings and reviews, other people listen. So if you're on iTunes, if you're listening on iTunes, please take time to make that effort for me. I really appreciate it. Also, in speaking about awesome podcasts, this podcast that you're about to hear today has a lot to do with crime, right? So if you're into crime-related podcasts, I have one I want to recommend to you. I want you to go check out Villains of History. Villains of History. It's a kind of a mix between crime and a history podcast, because the very hilarious and extremely beautiful Kat Alvarado, the host, she takes kind of deep dive looks at individuals in history who are known to be either nefarious, notorious, bad or just criminal in some kind of way. And if you're like me and you really dig learning about history and you kind of like the bad guy stuff, Villains of History is definitely a podcast that you want to check out. I listen to it on Stitcher. That's my podcast app of choice in most cases, but it's available pretty much everywhere. Villains of History with Kat Alvarado. All right, so let me tell you real fast what my whole episode of this podcast is going to be about. It's about the very recently executed, convicted murderer, Rusty, that's his nickname, Bucklew. Russell Rusty Bucklew. Now, if you don't know who Rusty was, don't worry, I'm going to get you hip to all the facts of his case. I'm going to tell you about the murder that he committed. He also escaped. That's part of the story too. I'm going to tell you what he did when he had his brief escape, what he did when he was on the run. I'm going to talk about the protest that was surrounding his execution and what this nobody murderer, why it made his case become international news. Talk about the execution itself. And of course, we're going to finish up with my personal connection to Rusty Bucklew. I was, as the title of this episode implies, one of my many stays in visits to jails for crimes in my previous illegal life. I happened to be staying in the jail that he was in after he committed the murders, in the same jail that he broke out of, and he broke out when I was in there. And I'm going to tell you all about that too. And also I'm going to give you a little bit of details about the stay in jail. So if you've never been to jail, and I hope that none of you have to go, maybe I'll give you a little bit of insight of what it's like being in a county jail. So yeah, that's the episode. A little bit different than what we normally do around here, but I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's kick it off. My time in jail with murderer Rusty Bucklew, right here on the Filter Free America podcast. Let's go.
Don't try to run, don't try to escape. One of my trustees will put a bullet in your head. Put a bullet in your head.
No one has ever escaped, and no one ever will.
All right, so first, we're going to take a look at the crimes of Russell Bucklew, good old Rusty. And I just want to give credit to where I'm getting this information from. I went to the website called murderpedia.org. It's a pretty cool website. I just found it when doing the research for this episode, just by doing a random Google search. And what it is just a very simple, basic website to find information on murderers. I went to the Rusty E. Bucklew page. Don't ask me what his middle name is. Ernie, maybe? Ernie, Evan, Ernest, I don't know. But his name is Russell E. Bucklew. That's his full name. And it's kind of cool how they got it set up. It's like, they got the case for the facts that I'm going to read here in a second, but then it also has got kind of like the quick stats for the particular murderer. And it goes, I'll just read those through you. It's got classification: murderer, characteristics: jealous rage, kidnapping, and rape. Number of victims: 1. Date of murder: March 21st, 1996. Date of arrest: the next day, wounded by police. His date of birth was May 16th, 1968. Victim profile is Michael Sanders. That is the name of the victim who was murdered. Method of murder: shooting. Location: Cape Girardeau County, Missouri, USA. Status: sentenced to death on May 15th, 1997. So here are the case facts. I'm going to read through this real fast, and this will kind of get you up to speed of who we're dealing with, who Mr. Rusty is. Russell Bucklew apparently did not want to live apart from Stephanie Ray. The two had lived together in Cape Girardeau County until Ray decided to break up with Bucklew on Valentine's Day, 1996. Holy shit. Okay, look, I'm not making excuses in any kind of way for Rusty's behavior here. But why do you break up on somebody on Valentine's Day? I mean, if you were going to break up with somebody on Valentine's Day, I'm pretty sure you knew on February 15th that this shit ain't going to work out. I'm pretty sure that it didn't just happen on Valentine's Day, but I digress. Bucklew left their mobile home. Of course it happened in a mobile home. Left their mobile home and went to live with his parents. Okay. On March 6th, Bucklew returned to the trailer he had shared with Ray and found Michael Sanders. She's already shacking up. Look, again, not victim blaming here at all. But let's see. They broke up on Valentine's Day in February. Well, I guess that's a good enough time for her to get over him and move on to somebody else. But I don't know, whatever. But again, not trying to make any justification for what I'm about to read here. Continuing, on March 6th, Bucklew returned to the trailer he had shared with Ray, found Michael Sanders, the victim in the case, there, concluded that Sanders and Ray were romantically involved, put a knife to Sanders' throat, and threatened to kill Sanders if Sanders ever came back to Ray's trailer. God damn it, this is so fucking white trash. Later that same evening, Bucklew returned to the trailer, found Ray alone, threatened her with a knife, cut her jaw, and punched her in the face before leaving. Ray reported all of this to the police. Good. Bucklew called Ray at work the following day, March 7th. He threatened her again and promised to kill her, Sanders, and her children if she saw her with Sanders again. Ray moved in with Sanders, fearing to return to her own home. You mean trailer, not home. Sometime during the night of March 20th, Bucklew stole his nephew's car, another victim. Stealing your own nephew's car, you asshole. 2 of his brother's pistols, because one is never enough, apparently. 2 sets of his brother's handcuffs. Holy shit, why does his brother have 2 sets of handcuffs? Okay, it doesn't say here that he was a cop or anything, but he has 2 guns, 2 sets of handcuffs. I want to know that story too. And a roll of duct tape. Of course, you need to steal a roll of duct tape as well. Did this man not have anything of his own for this crime? He didn't have the car to get there. He didn't have the pistols. He didn't have the handcuffs. And he also had to get a roll of duct tape from someone else. He left a note. Okay. He left a note asking his family to not report his theft to the police. Well, fuck you, Rusty, number one. Okay, you're not going to steal my car, my guns, my handcuffs, and my duct tape and not expect me to report it to the police. I'm just saying, fuck you very much. By the afternoon of March 21st, Bucklew began to, this is like a $10 word here, surreptitiously following Ray as she left work and ran errands, ultimately discovering where she lived by following her to Sanders' trailer, another trailer. This must be the most white trash crime ever reported. Bucklew waited for some period of time before he knocked on Sanders' trailer's door. One of Sanders' oh god, this is where it gets bad. One of Sanders' children opened the door. Sanders saw Bucklew through the window, escorted the children back to the back bedroom, and grabbed a shotgun. Bucklew entered the trailer with a pistol in each hand. Who the fuck is this guy? Sanders came into the hallway carrying a shotgun. Bucklew yelled, "Get down!" and without further warning, began shooting at Sanders. Sanders fell, struck by 2 bullets, one of which entered his chest and tore through his lung. Sanders dropped the shotgun. It went off and blew a hole in the trailer wall. That probably cost about $5 worth of damage. Bucklew aimed the gun at Sanders' head. And this is where it gets bad. But when he saw Sanders' 6-year-old son, Bucklew fired at the boy instead. The shot missed. Thank goodness. Holy shit. I didn't know all these details of this case, but back when I was in jail with this guy after all this had happened. I didn't know these details until just now doing the research. I knew the basics of it. I didn't know that he shot at a kid. I didn't know that part. Ray stepped between Bucklew and Sanders, who was holding his chest as he slumped against the wall. Bucklew invited Ray to drop to her knees. That's very awkwardly written. When she delayed, he struck her face with the pistol. He produced handcuffs, handcuffed her hands behind her back, and dragged her to the car. The two drove away. Holy shit. So he's leaving the dead or dying father there with his kids, one of which he fucking shot a gun at. During the journey that followed, Bucklew demanded sex. Of fucking course he did. Of course he did. When all the acts he demanded were not performed, again, that's very weirdly written. When all the acts he demanded were not performed, Bucklew raped Ray in the back seat of the car. Resuming the journey, Bucklew drove north on Interstate 55. By this time, law enforcement authorities had broadcast a description of Bucklew's car. Trooper James Hedrick saw the car, called for assistance, and began following Bucklew. They ultimately apprehended Bucklew after a gunfight in which both a trooper and Bucklew were wounded by gunshot. And sadly, Michael Sanders bled to death from his wounds. So that is the crime that started all this mess off. Now, if you're not a regular listener or you're a new listener to the podcast, you may have not got to the episode that was released on 12/5/2018, titled "I Wanted to Be Black Until I Got Shot." If you haven't or haven't heard me make reference of it in any other episode, and back in 1996, I was a purveyor, a dealer of a supplier, very low-level, street-level supplier of crack cocaine. I did that. That was my profession. That was my job, I guess you could say. So yeah, it wasn't big time. By no means. I wasn't like some Scarface level cocaine dealer. No, I was just a street level crack cocaine dealer. In 1996, for a couple years, it was kind of an interesting experience, to say the least. One that I've like to think that I've grown from. But all of that is the catalyst for how I got a personal connection to Rusty, our hero. I don't know if hero is the right word, but whatever. You know what I mean. Okay, so anyway, in 1996, I got arrested for possession of crack cocaine. Again, refer to the previous episode to get the details. Long story short, I ended up going to the same county jail where Rusty was being held. Okay, so before I get into the details and specifics of that, I want to kind of give you some visual references of the jail that both he and I were held in, and that he eventually escaped from, because knowing how the how the jail was set up is going to be important for you to understand how he escaped. So I guess arrival at the jail. The jail was a small jail, wasn't like a big county jail. This wasn't a major metropolis type area. These are smaller cities and towns that this county jail was provided its services to. And it was a 3-story building, and the jail part of the building was at the lowest level, the ground or basement. I guess it was partially ground level and partially basement level, depending on what side of it you were on. But if you arrived at the jail, you arrived there 2 different ways. If you arrived there as a prisoner, at least. One was you just were sentenced in court or arraigned in court, and the court was located exactly across the street, right? Like And so if you went to court and they found you guilty of something, they sentenced you for 30 days in the county jail. They literally handcuffed you there in the courthouse and walked you across the street to the county jail. If you were like me and you went to this jail because you were arrested for a crime, you were brought in through the garage entrance in a police transport vehicle. Basically, on the one side of the building, there was a big garage door. That garage door would raise up. You would drive in. Garage door would close behind you. And the police officers would, who brought you there, would escort you into the county jail. Now, here's where some of the points of reference are going to start to get important, and you might want to remember these to understand how he escaped. Again, this is a male and female facility. Obviously, the male and female prisoners were kept separate. So, again, going through the garage, entering the building. When you entered the building, it was basically 3 paths you could take. You could go straight, which would go into the kitchen area. You could make a left turn, which would take you to the women's facility. I can't tell you at all what the women's facility was like. Any kind of way. I don't know if it was cells in there, if it was like a big dormitory thing. I don't know, because obviously I've never been on that side. But those details aren't really important. The other way you could go is make a right turn. And if you made a right turn, it would take you into an airlock system that would eventually take you into the male side of the jail. If you don't know what I mean by airlock, I'll explain. In this context, it's basically visualize a barred door, like a traditional jail door that was powered. When a guard or a guard escorting a prisoner was to come in, they would, buzz the guards in the control booth. They would open up that one side that you were at of the airlock, and you guys would walk in. You and the guard would walk in. That door would close behind you. And then once that door closed and was secured, the other door opened up, and then they would walk you into the male side of the jail area. That's just was a default redundancy thing to help keep people from escaping. But remember that. Once inside the male facility, all right, I'll kind of give you the layout. When you walk in through that airlock, you're in what is called the common area. Common area served multiple purposes. Part of its purpose was it was the finger quotes library, and by library it was just a big ass bookshelf with a bunch of ragtag, dusty ass fucking old copies of books that wasn't a great collection by any means. Even though when I was in there for like 9 months, so I read quite a few books, even books I didn't even like, but whatever. Also in that common area was, let's see. To the right was the one of the shower areas. Also the prisoner receiving area. This is the area that once you got into the jail, they booked you in, did fingerprints and all that stuff. What else was there? Also there was serving windows from the kitchen. So the kitchen, I remember when we walked into the building, the straight ahead, you would have took you to the kitchen. Well, inside that common area were some barred, basically like a serving window, like if you were pulling through a drive-through, kind of like that, but walking. And of course there was bars on the windows, right? And so that was there. Also in this common area was the laundry room. Laundry room was essentially just the size of a closet. Not a lot of room in there. There was a room for 2 dryers and 2 washers. And then a bunch of shelves in there that held prisoner uniforms of various sizes. There was a trustee, which is a fancy word for a prisoner doing work inside of a jail. He was the laundry room trustee, and he was in there washing clothes, folding clothes and things like that. If he wasn't there doing work or didn't have work to do, then he would be back in his cell or whatever block that he was on. Also in that common area is what was called the bubble. The bubble was basically the guard booth. Reason it was called the bubble was because it was a secured round shaped structure within this common area that had glass windows all the way around it. So the guards could see people coming into the common area, and they could also turn around in their swivel chairs and look at the 3 cell blocks. And then, of course, they had monitors for security cameras and all that stuff, and all their cop crap was in there as well, too. What else do I need to tell you? Oh, the 3 cell blocks. There's 3 different cell blocks. There was one called North Block, there was one called South Block, and there was one called the Dorm. These 3 blocks were all a little bit different. We'll start with the Dorm. The Dorm was like the lowest security risk area. By dorm, it's just a big open bay with a bunch of bunk beds, right? A bunch of metal frame bunk beds that were bolted to the floor. I think it held, I want to say no more than 50, right? Like probably high 30s or 40s, something like that. That was how much that held. And there were some picnic tables, a black and white television, and a bathroom, and some phones in there that you could only use by calling collect. That was the dorm. The next tier, as far as security level, would have been the North Block. North Block was like a hallway with a bunch of cells, just kind of like your regular cliche jail cell that you would see in a prison or jail movie. It's got metal bar wall. Inside each cell there was one of the metal bunks, like what was in the dorm. Metal toilet. That was also a sink, and a fake polished piece of stainless steel that served as a mirror. And on that one, that was the smallest capacity. I want to say there was only 8 or 10 cells, 2-man cells in there. Then the last block was the South Block. That was the highest security area. It was bigger than North Block, had at least twice as many cells, maybe 3 times as many. I can't remember. But difference there was they had doors that you see like in a higher security facility where it's like an all metal solid piece door, and then there's like a piece of bulletproof glass for like a peek through window, and then there's like what they called the chuck hole, which is like a little smaller door that opened up lower in the door that you could slide food trays in. Now, that doesn't mean that either one of those blocks, north or south, that they were locked down all the time. They had free time or recreation time, which means in the morning time, the jail cells would open up and the prisoners could come out and intermingle within that block, that cell block. They had to stay on their cell block unless asked to come out or had to come out for something specific, but they were on that cell block. There were picnic tables on that cell block for them to, hang out and converse and play games and things like that or whatever. The dorm, it didn't have a lockdown, so they were free roaming all the time. If you lived in the dorm side of things, you could, get up, go to the picnic table, play games, watch TV, whatever. Throughout the day, there was no lockdown time. Only time you were required to be in your bunks was at the night hour. They would shut off the lights, and then it's their time for everybody to go to bed. Now, the only other part I haven't told you about now was one other small jail cell. Okay, and this jail cell was located in between the entrance for the North Block and the dormitory, and it was called the Bird Cage. Bird Cage meaning that it was like a kind of on the corner of the overall common area, and had 2 walls coming out made out of barred walls, and there was room for a single bunk, and I think that was it. That's right. Yeah. Because whoever's in there had to use the bathroom in the common area. So it didn't even have a bathroom in there. Now, normally this was just like an observation cell or a temporary holding cell. Like if multiple people came into the jail at one time to get processed and booked. If they were processing one prisoner at a time, they'll hold another prisoner in there. That's normally what it's used for. Not normally a place where a prisoner would live or stay at full time while in the jail. Not normally. Okay. So now kind of the outline of the building and the facility. And now let's talk about the day that I came in there and met Rusty. when I got there, this was not the first time I was there. This is the time I stayed there the longest. This was, of course, because it was a drug charge. I had a bond that was way more expensive than I was able to afford, so I had to sit there and go through the court process, which ended up taking me about, I keep going between 7 and 9 months. I can't remember which one it was. It was at least 7 months, but it might have been 9 months, but whatever. But again, when I got there, sadly, not my first trip to this jail, so I was as comfortable as one would be going into a jail. Like, it was common ground for me. I had been there before, not my first rodeo type thing. Of course, living in the smaller size community at the time, and being a drug dealer, you have other friends who are drug dealers and criminals. And of course, when I got there were people there that I already knew. So it was a little bit of camaraderie, as much as one can have in a jail facility. Now, the difference of this time, though, when I was brought in, when it was booked, was what was going on in the birdcage. As I mentioned before, a person doesn't normally stay in that birdcage longer than just being held in there temporarily for processing. But when I arrived and I was getting booked in, I took note that there was a person who was in an orange uniform, meaning they had already been processed, and they were in the birdcage, and it looked like they were there. They had been there for some time. And the reason I say that is because they had property in there. I could see, like papers and books and things that you don't have when you first arrive to jail, right? Especially when you're in that cell, you're just being held there. But this prisoner had it in there. Again, I don't know who this prisoner is at this time. So I get processed, I get booked in, I get fingerprinted, I get issued my beautiful orange uniform, I get issued my rubber sandals, and I get told to go to the dormitory, which is always great news. It's the most comfortable place in this cell, or in this jail, or at least it was at the time. This jail has actually been torn down and been rebuilt to a higher technology type place, and a lot of that is because of the story I'm telling you. But anyway, the guard gets finished processing me and tells me to go to the dormitory, and I walk across the common area to the dormitory door and wait to get let in. And as I'm there, I notice, the guy in this bird cage. Another thing I notice is the door to the bird cage is not closed. It's left open. I didn't know that at the time, but the reason that was left open was because, as I said before, there's not a bathroom in there. So to go use the bathroom, like in any other cell, there's a bathroom in there in the cell, or the dormitory, there's bathrooms in there kind of off into the corner. But for him to use the bathroom, he would have to be let out of the cage and go to the common area bathroom. So I guess they just got to the point where they just left the cage open for him, and he could just walk to the bathroom whenever he wanted to, type of deal. But anyway, the guy in the cage, who I later found out was Rusty. He was there, and he was looking at me as I was getting ready to go into the dormitory. And he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I guess good." I'm in fucking jail. I mean, how good can I be? But, I appreciate the friendliness. And he says to me, "Well, I'm the murderer here." That's what he said. He said it with a straight face. And he said, "I'm the murderer here." Right? Now, I'm not intimidated by him because I'm looking at the dude, and the dude is frail. I mean, he's frail. He had that disease that we talked about, and his body was just near bony. Like, he was around 100 pounds when I got there. Eyes sunk in, skin looked horrible because of the disease that he was dealing with, and just looked as unhealthy as can be, but not intimidated in any kind of way. So yeah, he said, "I'm the murderer," but I'm like, okay. I was like, I said something. What did I say to him? I was just kind of a smart. Oh, I said, he goes, "I'm the murderer." And I said, "Oh, great. Well, I'm an Aquarius." And we both kind of laughed, and the door opened up, and then I went into the cell, or to the dorm. So that was my very first conversation with Rusty Bucklew, was him telling me that he was a murderer. So, long story longer, I'm in the dormitory now, And there's not a lot of stuff to do in jail. It really boils down to reading, sleeping, playing card games and chess and checkers, and masturbating. That's really the most that you really do there, or watch a black and white TV that only has 2 or 3 stations on there. That's what you do. But that was kind of cool, at least, as much as it could be cool in jail for me, because I enjoyed playing card games, especially poker and spades and hearts, which are some of the main ones. One thing that happened often in these games was gambling took place. Okay. Mainly gambling over poker and spades, but sometimes even chess and things like that. Well, too. We also played dice, right? Like craps, but street craps, right? But the thing was, we didn't have any dice, right? They didn't sell dice in the commissary. If you don't know what a commissary is, in the context of a jail, it's basically a place where once or twice a week, in our case, we could go and spend money that we had on our books. Our books is basically like your bank account for jail. And you could go there and buy things that they didn't serve you, like on the food tray, things like, bags of Doritos or chips or whatever, or candy bars. What else? Hard candy. You could buy packs of cards. What other was food stuff do they have? Anything else for food? It was mostly just junk food as far as the food goes. Some beef jerky. That was like a little pack of Lynx, whatever that is, the brand name of jerky, Jack Lynx, I guess. That would be like the top tier thing that you would buy, was one of those single serving packs of that. But I also sell like cards. You could get like a chess set, a checker set. You can get an AM FM radio. You could get that with earphones, not like a one that would play out loud, but just earphones. Deodorant, soap, shampoo, socks, things like that. That's the stuff that you would buy. So how the gambling went down was there was no money, in your hand. You didn't have cash in your hand or in your pockets or anything like that. It was all on your books, right? So how gambling took place was basically these items that you could buy at the commissary were now cash, right? So let's just to keep the math simple, if a bag of chips cost 25 cents, they're 25 cents. That bag of chips is the value of 25 cents. So if you wanted something that cost $1, you wanted to trade with somebody, you needed 4 bags of chips to equate, the price of whatever you're trading for. The piece of jerky, I think, was like $1.25. So you need 5 bags of chips to trade with somebody to get even money. But that's what we used to gamble with for the value, right? Now, of course, gambling, even if you're gambling for snacks and what have you, is illegal. Not something or maybe not illegal, but it's not something they want done in the jail. Not because they're trying to enforce the laws in that context. They know that potential for fights and things like that could happen if they're gambling. So even if you're gambling for snacks, you had to make sure that they didn't know that, right? So like if we were playing poker and we bought into a game of poker, everybody bought in with $5 or $10 worth of commissary, which was big time money in jail. Basically everybody would put their $10 worth of snacks and items into a pillowcase, and that would be the pot. And to represent the value of the stuff that you put in, we would take a deck of cards, obviously not the deck we were using, but a second deck, and we would fold it 2 ways, once down the middle and then once long ways. So there would be 4 sections within the card, 4 even sections, and each section would have a rounded corner to it, so they were all kind of uniform. And then we would tear them down those folds, and then from there you would have 4 even shaped pieces of playing card, and those would represent chips, and we would put $1 value on them. So it would be maybe each corner of a playing card was 5 cents. So 4 of them would be, 20 cents or whatever value you wanted to put onto it at the time. And it also helped us maintain that nobody was cheating, because all the chips looked the same. They were one even corner with a rounded edge. So that's how we maintain the value. I was talking about the dice, and I got sidetracked. Another game that we played was dice, with street craps. Basically craps with all the side betting and all that. You're just betting on the rolls of the dice, or betting on somebody else's rolls of the dice. But they didn't sell dice in the commissary because obviously there's only so much you can do with dice. So they didn't want to, make it easy for people to gamble. But we did make dice, right? We actually made dice. And if you don't know how to make dice in jail, this is how you do it. You need a few things. You need water, you need toilet paper, you need toothpaste, and an ink pen, and you need to be bored. So how you do it is you take a wad of toilet paper, soak it in some water till it becomes like that mushy, kind of almost like a paper paste. It becomes a moldable ball. And then you take some toothpaste and kind of start mushing that up in the ball as well too. And the toothpaste kind of acts almost like a paste or like a cement. And then once you get all that kind of mixed together in one ball, you start shaping it into a cube, like a die. And kind of use your thumb and your forefinger, and you kind of square it one way, square it another way, square it another way, and you keep shaping it and molding it and pressing it and compressing it till it gets down to this nice perfect cube. And as you're doing that, of course, the excess water is dripping out as you're squeezing it from one side to another. You get a pretty decent shape on there to it's a nice good sized cube, and then you just let it sit there and let it air dry. Or if you got access to a heat vent, you could set it right there on the heat vent, and it will dry out. The remaining water will evaporate and becomes a nice little pretty hard cube. I mean, it's definitely not as heavy as a die, but it's dried paper at that point, but it's a cube of paper. Then once it dries, you can draw the dots of the dice on there, and boom, you got a pair of dice. So that was another way that we gambled. That really doesn't have anything to do with the story. I just wanted to tell that part because I think it's kind of interesting, the jail ingenuity involved in making a dice to gamble with. But where gambling does come into play is again with Rusty, okay? Because again, Rusty, because of his charges and because of his, he was crazy, as we've learned from the rest of his story. They kept him off in that side room, but they got comfortable with him, right? And then what I'm about to tell you now is kind of where my version of the story differs greatly from the story, the official story of the jail, because I'm pretty sure, that they did, sold the whole thing as being totally different than what actually happened when this happened when we were there, because it actually, his whole escape was a lot to do with their incompetency and their violating their own rules of the jail. First rule they broke was letting Rusty leave from his little bird cage area, basically at his own will. Like I said, they started leaving the door open so they wouldn't have to open it every time for him to go use the bathroom. That was probably the first mistake. Then from there, they got to the point where they were so comfortable with him because he was, let me tell you this now. He was playing the role. I mean, for all the heinous shit that he did, he was a brilliant criminal mind. And, he was there before me, so I didn't see the first part of his arrival. But when I was there and after we started piecing everything together after his escape, it was clearly obvious that he had been planning this from basically nearly day one of arriving there. And he was pretty brilliant in his planning and execution of this escape because he had just played the role so perfectly that got the guards to lower their guard, I guess is how you'd say it. He was, polite. He didn't break any rules. He did everything he was supposed to do. And they allowed him more privileges than he should have had, right? Like he should have been in a secured cell. He shouldn't have been able to leave that cell at any time, especially with the history of his original charges. From that mistake, they started letting him basically commingle between the other cell blocks, right? Like if he wanted to go in the dorm and play poker with us, they let him in. They just opened the door. He'd say, "Hey, can I go in there and play poker with those guys?" And they would open the door and let him in. And he would even go visit the other two blocks, the North Block and the South Block. So that was a huge, big no-no right there. Shouldn't have happened at all. If he was going to be allowed in the dorm, he should have been in the dorm full time, not moving from one side to the other for a multitude of reasons. I mean, you can transport contraband from one block to the other and all kinds of things, but they let him do it. They just, let their guard down. So again, a lot of what I'm telling you is I learned after the fact, or it just became obvious after the escape happened, how it all kind of went together. And then some of it came out with the resulting charges that resulted from his escape for both him and for another prisoner that I'm going to tell you about. But I'm going to tell you as in the voice that I know it was happening at the time, but I didn't know it was happening at the time. So it wasn't like I was aware in any kind of way. So what was happening was, when they got this level of comfort for him and let him bend the rules and go from cell block to cell block, he was coming into the dorm a lot where we were at and playing poker with. I played poker with him multiple times. He was a good poker player, and I never had a problem with him. Never had a beef with him. I never saw him get upset with anybody else. So he was, it was a commonplace. I knew what his charges were, and I knew he fucking killed somebody, but it wasn't like a big deal at that point. We were all in there for something. So it just, became a normal deal. Here's the one different thing though. I didn't always play poker with him. He didn't always it wasn't always with our group, I should say. There's one or two different pods of people who played together, more often than not. And sometimes he played with us, but oftentimes he didn't. Oftentimes he played with 3 other people together, and they, would play games, just those 4 guys, him, the laundry room trustee, and then the 2 trustees who worked in the kitchen. Again, trustee is just a prisoner with a job. So what we had found out was that during those games of poker, where it was just those 4 guys sitting at a table by themselves, nobody else was involved, that's where a lot of planning for the escape took place. Because, and I'm going to answer that, I'm going to say this in a certain way, where I'm going to actually kind of withhold something that I do know, just because I don't know what the statutes of limitations are. But if you're smart and you pay attention to what I'm saying, you will figure out the truth that I'm omitting here. And that's only because I don't want to be a snitch on anybody, even though it's been many years now and Rusty's dead and it probably wouldn't matter anyway. But just figure it out. I know for a fact, because he was already sentenced, so I'm not going to say anything that would get anybody in trouble who has already been in trouble, that one of the people who helped plan the escape was the laundry room trustee. And I can say that without being a snitch or anything, because when everything went down and the investigation to escape all went down, the laundry room guy told on himself. That's basically what it boiled down to. Okay. Was there other help? There was. I will tell you that the sheriff's department, which the sheriff's department was what controlled the jail, and then the investigators and courts assumed that there was more help given, but it wasn't something that could be proven. So if you put all that together, what I said, then you would know who the other suspects were and whatever. But that's what I'm going to say. Why is my dog dreaming over there? Gertie, stop dreaming. My dog she's dreaming and she's chasing rabbits in her sleep. Gertie, stop, Gertie. So again, Rusty, laundry room trustee, and the 2 guys who worked in the kitchen played poker together a lot. And apparently that's where planning for the escape happened. Okay. Again, Rusty shouldn't have been allowed to commingle like that. He was, number one, he was in there for a murder charge. He should have been either in the cell locked individually, or he should have been in the South Block or something like that. That's not my point of view. That's just how the rules worked in the jail. But those are the rules that were broken. All right. So and that was a regular occurrence. It happened almost daily where he would come into the dormitory and play cards with either us or with those three individuals. Something else I need to tell you, that Rusty didn't eat a lot, right? Rusty did not eat a lot of food. He ate very minimal amounts of food. Like I told you, when I first got there, he was about 100 pounds. When he got arrested after his escape, he was 90 pounds. Now, part of that was because of the medical condition he had, the blood vessel disorder. You know, that took a strain on his physical health. So he was already sickly already. But then you compound that with the fact that he just took in very little calories, right? Like when we get fed 3 meals a day, and during the feeding times he would drink his beverage and he would maybe eat one item off of his tray, then he would give the rest away. So in the time that I was there before his escape, like he was dropping weight like crazy. So, and again, when he escaped, his weight was 90 pounds. So again, this is a moment of, I didn't realize at the time what was going on, but after the fact, that all made sense when you learn how he escaped, that the weight loss thing was part of the plan, right? He was, sacrificing the caloric intake to get his weight down. Okay. So let's talk now about the day of the escape. I want to say it was a Sunday. I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I know for a fact it was a Sunday, and here's why I know. Okay, one of the things that happened in the jail was on Sundays, a Christian group, non-denominational Christian group would come in and offer a church service for the prisoners. When the church service happened, it was held in the common area. And how it worked is, if you wanted to attend the church service, you signed up in the morning time. I think the church service happened in kind of late afternoon. You signed up, and then at the time the church people arrived, they would set up in the common area, and then they would open up the 3 cell blocks. And if you had signed up, you would leave the cell block, go to the common area, attend the church service, then return back. And it was one of the rare times where everybody kind of mingled together from the 3 blocks, at least the people who signed up. Now, a lot of people signed up to go to the church just for something to do. I did it myself. Like, I didn't go there because I really wanted to do the church thing. I just wanted to move geographically within the jail somewhere else and get a new point of view and have some kind of form of mental stimulation besides, reading books and jerking off. So I went out to church service in that day too. Rusty was also out there in the church service as well too. Church service, it was after, it was later in the evening time. Okay, because this is all matter. I'm kind of thinking back now as I'm recording this. So the church service was later in the afternoon. I think it was after the dinner time meal. Everybody who wanted to go went to the church service. Church service lasted, I think, an hour, maybe an hour and a half at the most. I'm pretty sure it was just an hour. Then when everybody was done, we would go back to our cell locations. And as I mentioned, I was out there, and also Rusty was there. After the service was over, we all went back to the cell blocks and enjoyed the rest of our evening rec time. And then I want to say 9 o'clock. Don't quote me on the time for sure, but I think 9 o'clock. No, because there was news too. So it must have been like 10 o'clock was like the shutdown time when the lights went out. And when the lights go out, either if you're in the dorm or if you're on the blocks, you got to go to your bunk or go to your individual cell, depending on where you're at. After you go to bed, I think maybe shortly thereafter, maybe 10:15, 10:30 is when they do the change of shift count, right? Where they, like the guards coming on, take the count numbers from the shift before them, and then they physically walk cell block to cell block and physically count everybody in the jail. Okay? Make sure that the numbers match up before they take over the shift. So that happened. And again, I guess I wasn't paying attention, and most of us weren't. We didn't really notice anything weird at this point. Okay. The count happened, we're all in bed, and then the lights came on not too long after that. And that never happens, right? Like, why would the lights come on after it's rec time's over and everybody's either in their bunks in the dorm or in their individual cells? So we knew something was up. Next thing we notice, the common area starts filling with sheriff's department officers who were either on patrol or ones working upstairs or whatever, and also police officers from some of the local departments, police departments, started showing up inside the jail cells, or inside the common area in the jail. That never happens. So what we thought was going to happen was there was going to be like a shakedown. A shakedown in jail terminology is basically where they do surprise inspections, where they look for contraband, be it drugs or weapons or just anything they're not supposed to have, and they'll go cell to cell and basically flip through your shit. If you've got your paperwork and all your property and all that stuff, and look for shit. And if they find shit on you, then they can, depending on what it is that they find, they can give you new additional charges or a punishment within the jail, like going to solitary or things like that. So that's what we thought was about to happen. But they did the shakedown, but they did it differently, and again with a way more officers than we'd ever seen before do this. This is not something, shakedown wasn't something new. Additionally, aside from just doing the normal shakedown, they also started going with flashlights in between the corridors that were between the walls. Okay. This might be a little complicated to visualize, but basically, because you're in a jail facility and because you need to protect everything from either, vandalism or potential escape or things like that, things like the plumbing controls for like the individual toilets, the water lines and all that were not accessible to the prisoners, obviously. So they had like a corridor built that would go between the wall areas that was just wide enough for, one person to kind of walk through. Like if they had to go back there for maintenance to, repair something in the plumbing or check something or whatever. So part of the shakedown, we noticed they were opening up those access doors that are locked steel doors and going in there with flashlights looking around. And it's at that point that we start to, really start to realize there's more going on than just a normal shakedown, right? So as that's going down and everybody else is going through everything, they start doing the shakedowns in the individual blocks, pulling people out, going through all their stuff, looking through everything. I'm still not realizing what it is that they're looking for, and until they start doing the count again. Right? This is, right after the original shift change count. They start doing this fucking shakedown and start looking through all these corridors. And then they get us back to our blocks and tell us to line up again for a count that isn't a scheduled count. So they go through and they count again. And then like the sheriff shows up, Sheriff Jordan. He's very rarely does he ever show up. Like there was a lieutenant. I can't remember what his name was. He was like in charge of the jail part of it. But the sheriff, of course, as you know, is in charge of the sheriff's department, is the sheriff, an elected official. Well, he's down there. That never fucking happens. You never see him down there. And they're going through and they're looking and stuff. And I can't remember how they told us or how we know. I think maybe another prisoner recognized what it was. And I think, don't quote me on that. I'm this is many years ago. But I think that's how I first realized that what they were looking for was an escaped prisoner. I think another prisoner had recognized what was going on, and man, all the sheriffs and cops who were there, they were irate, they were angry, they were hostile to us, right? Part of what they did after they did multiple physical counts of humans again, to just double, triple checking and looking again. Eventually, the message comes out I can't remember how I know. How did I know? I don't know. But anyway, somehow along the story, I realized that the person that they were looking for was Rusty. Rusty Bucklew was gone. He wasn't there. He wasn't, maybe I just looked in the birdcage and he wasn't there or whatever, but he had disappeared, and that's who they were looking for. So the next level of the investigation, again, this is all happening in the same night, right? Shit is, the guards are going fucking crazy. The sheriff's fucking mad. We're seeing him. We never seen him before. They start calling us out individually. Individually, they talk to everybody in the jail. Everybody. They call you out. You come out to the booth area and you talk to the sheriff and the lieutenant, whoever the fuck he was, the number 2 guy. And they interviewed everybody in the fucking jail, asking us questions about what we knew about Rusty escaping and all this shit. I had my turn, and I told them, I was like, I don't know shit, dude. I didn't just say that because I don't snitch and I don't want to talk to somebody. I meant it. I had no fucking clue. Like I just, I didn't even know he was gone until after he was gone. So it was an easy conversation for me. But again, these cops were assholes. Immediately for us, the other prisoners, the jail went on lockdown, obviously. Lockdown in this particular jail means that if you're in the dormitory where we were at, where we normally had freedom of movement during the rec time, where we, when the lights were on, we could go from our bunks to the benches and to the TVs and bathrooms and all that stuff. It became, now that in lockdown, we had to stay on our bunks. And it was like this for until he was back. I mean, yeah, it was until he was back. We had lost all of our privileges, all of our rec time and everything else. It was like they were mad at us. Like it was our fault, like, hey, you're the fucking guards here. I'm not here to do a job. I'm here to fucking do some time, apparently. But you're mad at me because you can't do your fucking job right. But whatever. So that was what it was like when he escaped. It was shit. We couldn't even use the phone for I think the whole time he was gone. It was, I want to say it was 7 days. Was it 7 days or was it only a few days? Maybe it was no more than a week. Maybe it was 4 days, something like that. But whatever. Yeah. So it was worse than regular jail. It was like being in jail the whole time that he was gone. And of course the fucking cops just gave us an ad every time every day they still do the same counts on the same shift changes and all that stuff. And it was there was any kind of friendliness or any kind of, rapport that, we as the prisoners had with some of the guards that came in. That shit was all gone. It was all out the window. They all treated us like fucking shit. Like we had fucked and dropped the ball, but whatever. But eventually, as we know in the story, he was caught and he was brought back to jail, and he had some bumps and bruises on him that he didn't leave with. Let's put it like that, because he embarrassed the sheriff's department. Right there, I think there had been another escape under a different type of situation, but it had been 15 years before this facility had any kind of escape issue like this, and definitely not to this scale. All right, so now you probably want to know, how is it that Rusty escaped the jail? All right, and I'll tell you, I'm not telling you anything that the cops don't already know, because as I said, the laundry trustee, he told on himself and basically told the sheriff and the investigators and everything how the escape went down. So this is not new information, but just probably new information to you guys, because you guys weren't there, didn't read the news stories back when it happened in 96. So here's how the escape took place. Yeah, as I understand it to have happened. Again, I was at the church service. Rusty was at the church service along with maybe 10 or 12 at the most. I don't think I ever remember there being more than 20 prisoners at one time at the church service. But so whatever it was, there was probably 10 to 15 people at the most. So church service went down and was going down, and I and everybody else in the jail did not notice that Rusty left the group right there in the common area. Remember, visualize what I told you before. There was in the common area, they were right in the middle of it was a big control bubble with guards who could visually see with their eyes down all the blocks, and they could see in the common area and look around. But somehow Rusty had left the church group and snuck from the church group into the laundry room, which was also right there in the common area. Now, once you're into that common area, or once you're into that laundry room becomes a blind spot because it was fucking maybe 6 to 8 feet from the guard bubble, but the guards in the guard bubble, they could just see inside the door, but they couldn't see to the immediate left because you go into the door, again, not very big, closet size, big enough for 2 washers, 2 dryers, and some shelves for the uniforms. But if you went into the door and then made a quick left, you were in a blind spot, right? There were no cameras in there. There was a camera, I think, facing the door, but there was no camera inside the laundry room itself. So once you got in and made that left, you were kind of hidden. All right, so that's what Rusty did. So that was step 1. Well, I guess step 1 was, convincing the guards to let him move from block to block to plan this, and then fucking starving himself. That was was planned. That was part 1 and part 2. So whatever step this was, that's what he did. He left the church group, snuck into the laundry room. Okay. Once inside the laundry room, he took off his jail uniform, and he had, the shoes that he wore were a shoe that was permitted in the jail, which was a Velcro securing or closing tennis shoe. No strings. That's important in jail. They don't want you to have jail string, or they don't want you to have shoestrings because you can choke yourself or somebody else. But at that time, they did allow people to, have gym shoes that were Velcro. So he got into that room. He took off his uniform top and his uniform pants, and he had his Velcro tennis shoes, a pair of socks on, and boxer shorts. Right? That's an important part that I'll get to here in a minute of why he stripped down to that. Then once he's stripped down, there is a trash can in the laundry room, right? And he got into the trash can, inside the bag of the trash can, and this is where the laundry room trustee came into play. The laundry room trustee tied the bag up. So it was like a tied up bag that held Rusty inside the can. And then apparently the guard put another bag of garbage on top of that bag, right? So now Rusty is being held in this bag, tied up in a or inside his trash can, being tied up in the garbage bag that's inside the can. So as church service went off, everybody went back to their cells. Part of the normal procedure that happened every single night, regardless of what day of week it was the kitchen staff or the kitchen trustees were still in the kitchen area doing their nightly cleanup. All right, they'd already served dinner. Dinner was served right before church service. So they were, during church service, they were still in the kitchen, doing their kitchen duties, cleaning up and everything, getting ready to, close down the kitchen for the day. And as that's happening, Rusty's getting into the trash can and everything. Church service ends. Everybody goes back to their cells. And then this is where the routine part, kicks back in. After the kitchen's done, their job is to take out trash, right? So they'll leave, at the time they left the kitchen area with bags of trash from the whatever they did that day, all the food they had cooked, whatever the kitchen trash there was. And then they were escorted by the matron. The matron was a female guard who was also in charge of the kitchen. They would, there was one on duty, and basically they escorted the trustees out the door, out the garage to where the dumpsters were at, and then they dumped the trash. Now, part of the trash they dumped was the trash that came out of the laundry room. And how the laundry room trash got to them was this way. Was when it was time for the trash to go out, the guards would let the laundry room attendant, the laundry room trustee, bring the trash can into the airlock, right? So the first door, the door leading from the common area and the men's side of the jail, would open up, and the laundry room trustee would take that trash can and set it down in the middle of the airlock. Then he would walk back in the door that he just came in. The door would close, and then the guards would then open the other side of the airlock where the other two trustees were at. And as they've got the trash from the kitchen, they would then go into the airlock, grab that trash that the laundry room attendant left there. Then the airlock would close, and then they would leave the airlock and then walk out to the garage area. So what had happened was the laundry trustee carried Rusty in the trash can, set him into the airlock. Airlock closed. Then the kitchen trustees picked up that trash can, carried it outside, and they dumped the trash and Rusty into the dumpster. And that's how he got out of the jail. So you see a lot of things coming into play here now. You see, why he got in the trash can. You see now why his weight loss was so important. Why he wanted to lose as much weight as possible, because he needed to be light to be trash, right? So I guess that's how I say it. He wanted to be as light as possible to be trash. So I guess when the people picked him up, it would feel heavy, but it wouldn't feel like the weight of a full-grown person who is, over 150 pounds or something like that. Still, I think it was like 90 pounds was what he was weighed at after the fact. But that was what all that planning was for. What else? Oh, yeah. So after they dumped him into the trash can, still normal procedure. All the trash was dumped. The trustees were escorted back in by the same matron. They would bring their cans and back into the kitchen. They would go into the airlock. The airlock would close. The airlock would open up from the other side again, and they would walk back into the men's part of the facility, dropping the can off for the laundry guy. He would put that back in the laundry room, and everybody would go back to their respective cell areas, and that was the end of the workday for those guys. Now, Rusty's out in the trash can, right? Which is just located right outside the door. There was no wall or fence or anything like that to secure the dumpsters. The dumpsters were just out there on the side of the jail. So he was outside of the facility. There was no walls around him at this point. So what had happened was, this is evening time, dusk. He jumped out of the dumpsters, and we remember how he was dressed. He was dressed in just his boxers, a pair of Velcro tennis shoes, and socks. So what he did was just start jogging away. Because, yeah, he had boxers on, but it kind of looks like one of those goofy runner guys that run around you see running with no shirt on, and just shoes and socks and a little pair of fucking ass-grabbing little mini running shorts. They were boxers. That's also why boxers were no longer allowed in the jail anymore after all this shit went down. Rusty changed a lot of shit for people with this escape. Now you can only have whitey tidies while you're in there now. At least it was when I was back in there. I don't know if things have gone back or not by this point. Probably not. But that's how he got loose. He took off just like a jogger into the night. So now we know what Rusty did, how he did it, and all the horrific acts that were involved in his crimes. You know that he got arrested. You know that he went to jail with me, and you know that he escaped and how he escaped. But now I'm going to read a portion of a story printed in the Southeast Missourian that talks about a lot of things about the case. This was actually published on March 22nd, 2011. But the part I want to read is what Rusty did after he escaped. So I'm not going to read the whole story. I'm just going to give you that so you know that his crime spree wasn't over after his first arrest. Once he escaped, there was some more shit going down. And I really like the way that the story was written. It's very dramatic. But let's see. We'll start reading right here. It is in the afternoon of June 19th, 1996. and Deputy Richie Walker is on patrol. His eyes are darting as he cruises along State Highway 177 south of Egypt Mills, a small community in northern Cape Girardeau County. Walker's a cop on serious business. Walker is hunting a killer. One who had murdered a man a few months back right in front of the man's small child. One who kidnapped a woman, raped her, held her hostage until it ended in a shootout with highway patrol troopers somewhere up in St. Louis. Except it hadn't ended. 2 days ago, Russell Bucklew escaped from the Cape Girardeau County Jail. Bucklew had gone out with the trash. At least one other inmate helped him. He had attacked 2 people less than an hour before. Stephanie Ray's mother and her mother's boyfriend. Bucklew had jumped out of a utility closet with a hammer in one hand and a knife in the other. Why is he always having with the 2 double weapons things? Who the hell does this guy think he is? With a knife in the other before attacking them both and fleeing. All right. So this is what he did. He got out of jail. All right. He went to jail for raping his ex-girlfriend and shooting her new lover in the chest and taking a pop shot at a kid. And he breaks out of a fucking county jail, which is a tremendous feat all on its own. And instead of running for the hills, running to escape, at the time possible murder conviction and execution, and instead of doing that though, he goes back to the woman's house who he raped and attacks them again. This dude had to go. Where were we at? Oh yeah. Stephen King type stuff, one person had said. They were pretty sure Bucklew had been looking for Stephanie. Yeah, obviously. Now as Walker's vehicle approaches County Road 263, Walker sees a blue Chevy pickup with a camper heading his way. As the vehicles pass each other, Walker cranes his neck and 2 men exchange wide-eyed stares. Walker knows immediately it's him. Bucklew is driving the other car, the one that would turn out to be stolen. He stole another car, apparently. Walker wastes no time as the pickup accelerates, moving away quickly in Walker's rear view. Walker hits his lights, does a U-turn, and sees the pickup cresting a slight hill. For a moment, it disappears from view. As Walker tops the hill, he spots the truck. Walker notices the truck's brake lights are on. The truck has stopped. The pickup has swerved onto a county road and pulled down a few feet onto the road's right-hand side. Now it's sitting there, idling. Walker speeds up his cruiser to the truck, stops just short of it. He leaves a slight gap between it and the 2 vehicles. He wants to use his car as cover if it comes to that. As Walker pushes his door open, he sees Bucklew lunge out of the pickup. That's the word Walker will use twice in court. Lunge. Bucklew's momentum propels his slight frame toward Walker. Walker doesn't know if Bucklew's planning for a fight or flight. Either way is fine with Walker. Walker does what cops are trained to do. He thinks fast. Walker grabs his shotgun. He works the chamber on the pump shotgun with trained fingers, sending a round scurrying into the chamber. I really don't like the use of scurrying in regards to loading a shotgun. You're trying too hard here, whoever wrote this. Walker won't hesitate. He'll shoot him if he has to. Get your hands up now. And that's basically where he got arrested. So that's what he did when he broke out. Why the fuck would you not run? Why? How good was that woman's pussy if that's what he decides to do? You know you've got murder charges, right? That's what murder and rape charges. You've got the 2 worst crimes you could basically get in one crime. You break out of the fucking jail, right? You defy all odds by breaking out of a fucking county jail, and you run right back there and attack the parents of the woman that you raped, and start going through this whole bullshit again. Holy shit, Rusty. So we've reached the last part of our story here. and this happened just recently. And this story I'm just reading from a random CNN post that was published on October 1st of this year. Missouri inmate executed despite activist concerns he could suffer because of his rare disease. Okay, number one, let's tackle this whole title right here. Number one, I am opposed to the death penalty. I am opposed to the death penalty, and it's from this angle here, and it's because I can find you so many examples of people, and some just recently, who were convicted of a heinous crime, murder, rape, or whatever, and because of advance in the technology of crime solving and DNA research and all that stuff, they were later exonerated. Some people who had been in jail 10, 20, 30 years, but were exonerated of their crimes, and if they were sentenced to death for those crimes prior, they'd probably be dead right now. But stories like this is where I wish you could kind of come up with a new version of the death penalty thing, and like set some kind of standard when you absolutely, positively, without a shadow of a doubt, when you have multiple eyewitnesses, video evidence, or what have you, and you know fucking damn well it's the person, that maybe we should, kill a few of them. But whatever, I don't know what the solution is, but that's not going to be solved in this episode. So here we go. I'm going to read from this story. Missouri inmate executed despite activist concerns he could suffer because of his rare disease. Missouri prison officials executed convicted murderer Russell Bucklew by lethal injection Tuesday night, despite objections from activists who thought the method would lead to a gruesome death. Bucklew, 51, was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary in 1997. Wait a minute, they left out the rape part? He raped somebody. Why would we just skip the burglary part and talk about the rape part? Anyway, he was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead at 6:23 p.m. Central Time. Former Cape Girardeau County prosecutor Maury Swingle, I actually know that guy, who tried Bucklew, said the death was, quote, very peaceful, which is probably more than he deserved. A KFVS reporter who witnessed the execution said that he could see Bucklew on a gurney with a white sheet up to his chest. Bucklew was looking away from the viewing room. She said he turned his head so that he was looking straight ahead and was twitching his feet. Then he let out a sigh, and there was no more movement. The curtains were closed for a few minutes, she said, and reopened with him still on the gurney. There were no visible complications, she said. Swingle said Bucklew closed his eyes and went to sleep. Activists were concerned that Bucklew's disease would cause a gruesome death when he was administered drugs at his execution. He had a rare blood vessel disorder called cavernous hemanoma. I guess the G is quiet. Hemanoma? I don't know. I'm pretty close, whatever. The disease can cause tumors in the head and regular bleeding from the mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. It sounds like a way worse punishment. They should have just left him in a box and let this disease slowly kill him. Advocates for calling off the execution were worried that the lethal injection would cause prolonged suffocation and excruciating pain. Excruciating pain, much like the pain of getting shot 2 times in the chest or getting raped. The story continues with a quote here. We mourn the unnecessary, unlawful execution of Russell Bucklew tonight, said Cassandra Stubbs, director of the Capital Punishment Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. Missouri carried out an execution that risked torture and violated international law, despite Mr. Bucklew's remorse and exemplary prison record. The idea that killing this man, who was terminally ill and had been a model prisoner for 23 years, but he raped and killed somebody and escaped from jail and beat somebody with a hammer, was worth the stain on our democracy and our humanity is a disgrace. Look, I get it. I am with her in many execution related cases, right? But again, this goes back to what I said in the beginning. It's so hard to find a balance here because, yeah, we know this guy was a fucking shitball. We fucking know he was. I still think the worst punishment is just sitting in jail, especially when you've got this kind of disease. I mean, he's not going to get, really good medical care. I mean, you could do all kinds of things, or, just have somebody like fucking come by the cell every day and poke a finger in one of his fucking little sores on his face or some shit, whatever. You could do other things. I don't know. Anyway, Swingle, the former prosecutor, said Bucklew's death was in stark contrast to the violent death of his victim. Thank you, Michael Sanders, who was shot in front of his girlfriend and 4 children. And they left out the part about the kid getting shot at. Why are you not putting that in there? Governor Mike Parsons turned down a clemency request, said his press office, without providing additional detail. Because you don't need to provide additional detail. He fucking murdered a guy, raped a chick, and shot at a 6-year-old kid. Bucklew's attorney had argued the state should have considered death by lethal gas as an alternative. Okay, but he's still going to be dead. Anyway, in April, the Supreme Court ruled against Bucklew in a 5-4 decision, which means plans for the lethal injection can proceed. Justice Neil Gorsuch said the Eighth Amendment does not demand the avoidance of all risk of pain in carrying out executions. He also said Bucklew had failed to present any evidence that the lethal gas would significantly reduce his risk of pain. So there you go. That's basically the gist of why this relatively basic ass dude who murdered and raped somebody ended up getting his murder case all the way to the Supreme Court. And again, I'm anti-death penalty. I really am. But this specific one, and I don't think it really has to do with my personal connection to it, but just the facts of the case alone, I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over the execution of Rusty. All right, so with that, we're going to bring this episode to a close. I hope you like this kind of different format that I'm doing here. If I have another such story come up or something I want to tackle, I may present it in the same way. I love interviewing guests, but sometimes it's just fun to present something like this too. So if you like this version of the podcast, I'm going to keep doing the interviews. Don't worry, they're not going anywhere. But let me know if you like this episode. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you spay and neuter your pets and children. Make sure you keep seeking the truth. And I will talk to you in the next episode of the Filter Free America podcast.